What's going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So we are back to talk about the college football playoffs, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. 4 games between the 2 days, 1 game on New Year's Eve, 3 of them on New Year's Day. Nice slate overall for the holiday this week. But we are here to talk about all 4 games, talk about the matchups a little bit from each side of it, and who we believe will be advancing in the college football playoffs, moving closer to the national championship game. Before we do jump in though, if you could just hit that like and subscribe button down there. More college football content on the channel. There's a bunch of other stuff on there as well. Bunch of Michigan State stuff on the channel, but we do talk about college basketball, college football as a whole, and a bunch of other stuff on the channel. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a video. So jumping into the first one, Penn State versus Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, New Year's Eve at 7:30. Now, Penn State is 12-2, coming off of a home win in the first round of the college football playoff against SMU. Boise State had the first round bye after finishing 12-1 and winning the Mountain West Championship. Only loss for Boise State this year came against Oregon in Eugene. Ashton Jeanty did have 192 yards in that game, so he did have a good game in that one, and largely the main reason why they almost pulled off that upset at Oregon. Penn State has a 7-point home loss to Ohio State and an 8-point loss in the Big Ten title game to Oregon. Penn State is led by quarterback Drew Aller, over 3,000 yards on the season, 21-7 touchdown to interception ratio, about 69% completion percentage, solid season overall from Drew Aller. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are easily a top 5 running back duo in the country, in my opinion. Both around 900 yards, both 8 touchdowns. Tyler Warren is one of the most exciting players and one of my favorite players to watch in college football. Tight end for Penn State, but he can do it all. Over 1,000 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns, almost 200 yards rushing with 4 touchdowns, and has thrown 6 passes on the year as well. He snapped a ball as well. He can do it all across the board on offense for Penn State. On defense for Penn State, Jalen Reed, stud safety, 3 interceptions, 1.5 sacks on the year. Kobe King, 3 sacks, top 10 pick more than likely. Abdul Carter has 11 sacks on the year. Boise State is obviously, it all starts with Ashton Jeanty on offense. Guy, in my opinion, who should have won the Heisman. Almost 2,500 yards on the year, 29 touchdowns, 1 more receiving touchdown through the air for him. Quarterback Maddox Madison has been efficient this year, 2,700 yards, 22-3 touchdown to interception ratio with 5 touchdowns on the ground as well. Defensively, at defensive end, they have a guy in Imagn Hussein, 8.5 sacks on the year, and Sahai Oladipo brings in 6.5 sacks for them as well from the safety spot. But overall, Boise State is a top 6 scoring offense and in yards per game this year. Defensively, Penn State is a top 7 defensive unit when it comes to total yards per game and points allowed. So this is strength on strength here, what you want in the playoffs. But looking at Boise State, their other big game opponent in Oregon, which isn't the Oregon that we see now, but it was a 3-point loss for Boise State. But looking at kind of the formula for that game, they did have 34 points against a solid Oregon defense, but Ashton Jeanty's 192 yards on 25 attempts and 3 touchdowns, were the key to that one, and they'll need a similar, stat line and formula if they want to compete and win this game against Penn State. But Madsen at quarterback will have to play a lot better for them to be able to pull off this upset against Penn State. He went 17 for 40 in that one against Oregon, so it's going to need to be more efficient in that one. I don't think it'll be a similar game to that, though. I like where Penn State's defense is at this point in time, as opposed to where Oregon's defense was at that time. Both Penn State and Oregon, really good defenses, but Penn State, obviously, this is way later in the season. That was, the second game of the season. I like where Penn State's defense is, obviously, now, as opposed to that. But obviously, Penn State, they have a major weapon in Ashton Jeanty on the other side that they have to slow down, and they have plenty of guys to do that, and they can do it in different ways. I think Jeanty can still go off in this one, but I like Penn State. And that the Penn State spread, the spread for the game is about Penn State minus 11. Right now, at the time of recording, I think I'm taking that. I think this is a 2-touchdown win for Penn State. Here for James Franklin, getting another big win after a big first-round win against SMU. That's a playoff game, high-stakes game. he gets that win. I think he gets another one here and moves on in the college football playoff. Next up, Texas versus Arizona State in the Pietsch Bowl. 1 p.m. first game on New Year's Day here, but Texas, we've seen them in big games this year. At Michigan earlier in the year, versus Oklahoma, versus Georgia twice, at Texas A&M last game of the year, versus Clemson at home in the first round of the college football playoff. Overall, 12-2 coming in, and the only losses are to Georgia on the year. Quarterback Quinn Ewers has been fine this year, about 2,800 yards, 26-10 touchdown to interception ratio on the year. Solid running game. Quintravion Wisner, 973 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jaden Blue, 710 yards and 8 touchdowns on the year. Solid duo there. Matthew Golden has been their leading receiver, almost 800 yards through the air and 8 touchdowns. But they really spread around, though. 8 guys with 22 or more catches on the year, and 6 of those 8 guys with 30 or more catches on the year. So really spread that thing out through the air. But on defense, Anthony Hill Jr. has been a tackling machine for them. 99 tackles on the year with 7.5 sacks as well. Overall, an elite defense, only allowing 13.3 points per game, which is good for second in the country. Something I do want to note with Texas, though, kind of been watching as I've watched their games this season, field goal kicking. Brett Auburn, 60 for 60 on extra points, but 15 for 22 on field goals. All of those misses coming from 40-plus yards out. There's been some interesting high-level moments here this season in terms of kicking, and I think that's something to keep an eye on in this playoff that could impact a game here soon. I mean, look at the Ohio State-Georgia game a couple years ago on New Year's Eve. The Ohio State miss as time went out and as the ball dropped in New York City, that side-by-side video. But I don't know if that'll be a problem in this game, but that's something to keep an eye on in this college football playoff for Texas. Arizona State, 11-2 on the year, won the Big 12, had 4 top 16 wins on the year against Utah, Kansas State, BYU, and in the Big 12 championship against Iowa State. Losses to Texas Tech and Cincinnati on the year, and for my MSU people out there, Sam Leavitt has been really good for them at quarterback this year. 2,600 yards, 24 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, another 380-plus yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns as well. Cam Scatabo, really good as well at the running back position. 1,500 yards on the ground and 19 touchdowns. Jordan Tyson, 1,100 yards through the air and 10 touchdowns, but overall, not the most stout defense for Arizona State. 21 points per game allowed, middle of pack in the country, about 2 guys, Clayton Smith and Elijah O'Neal, both with 4 sacks. They have 5 guys between 2 and 3 interceptions on the year, but I am curious about Arizona State's special teams. I don't know the full story here, but 3 different place kickers on the year, and all of them have over 12 extra point attempts. One guy has 12 field goal attempts. He's 7 for 12. The other one is 1 for 2, and then the other one is 1 for 3 on field goals. So I don't know what's going on there. If they were trying different stuff, if, the one guy, with the most field goal attempts was just missing some field goals there and they were trying out some different stuff, or what the whole story is there, I don't know that. I can't say I watched a lot of Arizona State earlier in the year, or followed it that closely to know their place kicker situation, but I'm curious. Something there, if that could, same with Texas, that could play a factor either in this game or in the playoffs in general. But I think this Arizona State team would be a lot of people's sleeper team if they were at the bottom half of the bracket. But I just think this Texas team will be too much for them. The spread is Texas minus 13 at the time of recording. Seems about right in this one. I could see Arizona State keeping it close within 2 touchdowns or so, but I think Texas, having just played, comes out with a little more fresh in the first quarter. Arizona State, bounces back, keeps it close, for the most part, within 10 or so middle parts of the game, but then in the end, too much Texas, but I'll take Texas, and I'll take Texas to cover as well. All right, the third game and the probably most entertaining game, more than likely on paper, going into this 2-day slate here of the college football playoff, it is the rematch of the instant classic from Eugene earlier this year. It's Ohio State versus Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And, for me, the Rose Bowl, and for a lot of people, not called the granddaddy of them all for no reason. It is most people's, and it's mine included, favorite bowl game every single season. And on paper, this looks like another stellar matchup there. Ohio State, only 2 blemishes on the record this season, the 1-point loss at Oregon, and then, of course, the 3-point loss to Michigan a couple weeks ago. But they did just win pretty handily in the first round of the playoffs at home against Tennessee, 42-17. Will Howard, I'd say, kind of same category as Ewers this year. He's been okay, if not pretty good. 3,100 yards on the year, 29 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. 73% completion percentage is, the very impressive stat that kind of saves him here. But top 5 running back duo in Quinshawn Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, both over 830 yards on the season. 10 touchdowns for Judkins, 8 for Henderson. Star freshman, everyone knows about him, Jeremiah Smith, over 1,000 yards on the season. 12 touchdowns as well. Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate have been awesome as well, in one of, if not the best trio of wide receivers in college football. Cody Simon and Sonny Styles have been their leading tacklers, both over 80 this season on defense. Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom, probably the 2 biggest names that there on defense, especially in the secondary. Part of a loaded safety group with Sonny Styles as well. Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimola off the edge, both 6 and 8 sacks respectively. This Ohio State team, top 12 in scoring at about 37 points per game. Number 1 in yards allowed on defense and points per game allowed. Could argue the top defense in the country. But Oregon, on the other side, 13-0, have been awesome. After a shaky first 2 weeks, have wins over Ohio State, Illinois, and Penn State this year. Dylan Gabriel was at the Heisman ceremony, and he wasn't just there because Oregon was 13-0. He had a really good year. 3,500 passing yards on the year, 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 73% completion percentage, almost 200 more yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground as well. Jordan James took the lead at the halfback position, 1,200 yards on the year with 15 touchdowns. Tez Johnson led the way, over 800 yards, 10 touchdowns through the air, but a handful of other wide receivers that you like here on Oregon as well. Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, Terrence Ferguson at tight end as well. On defense, Bryce Botcher, do-it-all linebacker for them. Tasheem Johnson leads with 3 interceptions on the year. Mateo Yu, 10.5 sacks on the year. Jordan Birch, future first-round guy, 8.5 sacks on the year. Former Spartan Derek Harmon has 5 sacks on the year as well. Offense for Oregon averages about 36 a game. Defense gives up only about 18 a game, both near the top of college football. Line for this game is Ohio State minus 2.5. And in this one, I think I'm all over Oregon. Oregon is also plus 130 on the money line. So give me Oregon to take this one. I like the Oregon spread in this one, and I like Oregon money line in this thing as well. But this is a sketchy line, sketchy game, and a rematch from an instant classic earlier this season. All right, so last one, and probably the one that I am most unsure about going into this 2-day slate here, is the Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia. 8:45 on New Year's Day. Notre Dame coming in at 12-1, just beat Indiana at home 27-17. Only loss on the year was to Northern Illinois, second week of the season, after a big win week 1 at Texas A&M. Things were kind of going up, and then they immediately came crashing down for Notre Dame at the beginning of the year. But since then, they have bounced back really nicely. They haven't played a lot of big-time games this year. Only one-score game, though, since that loss to Northern Illinois. And that was against number 15, Louisville. Riley Leonard, good dual threat guy, 2,200 passing yards, 700 rushing, 17 passing touchdowns, only 6 interceptions on the year through the air, and 15 touchdowns on the ground as well for Riley Leonard. Really like their running back, Jeremiah Love, over 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns on the year. Defensively, Riley Mills, 7.5 sacks on the year. Xavier Watts leads the way with 6 interceptions, but overall, 11th best team in the country in rushing yards per game, 3rd in defensive points allowed per game. Georgia comes in at 11-2. A lot of big-time games we've seen Georgia in this year. Wins against Clemson to start the season, against number 1 Texas, against number 7 Tennessee, and then again against number 2 Texas. Only losses were to Alabama in an instant classic and Ole Miss, both of those on the road. We'll be without Carson back in this one, though, so it is Gunnar Stockton. Only 32 attempts on the year, 206 yards, 1 interception. We saw him in the second half of the SEC championship game, but imagine will look a little bit differently with a full prep time for him in this one. Nate Frazier and Trevor Etienne lead the way on the ground, both around 600 yards, 8 touchdowns for Frazier, 9 for Etienne. Arian Smith, 750 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns. Dominic Lovett, most receptions with 56 on the year, and most touchdowns with 6. But I'm looking at their tight end, Lawson Lucky, to help out a new cornerback in Gunnar Stockton and create some easy throws for him in this one. But defensively, not the dominant Georgia defense that we've become accustomed to in their title runs over the last little bit here over the last decade or so. But still good, only giving up about 20 points per game on defense. A couple guys, Jalen Walker and Chaz Chambliss, 6.5 sacks each. Not many interceptions either, only 8 as a team on the year. Dylan Everett leads the way with 3 interceptions on the year. Middle of the pack in the SEC in rush defense, which is obviously what Notre Dame likes to do. And as we said, Notre Dame towards the top in rush offense in the whole country. I think both teams want this game to be decided on the ground. I picked Georgia versus Texas for the national championship game. Before the playoff started, when we had that video up on the channel as well. First round, we only got one wrong. I thought Tennessee would beat Ohio State, but besides that, we got the other ones right. So I picked Georgia versus Texas coming into this playoff. I think this one's the decider. I think, yes, I know after this one there's only one game to the national championship, but I think this is a big one. I think whoever wins this game can get past Penn State in the next one to get to the national championship. Right now, the spread is Georgia -1. I don't love it, but I'm sticking with Georgia in this one. Again, this isn't the same Georgia that we've seen, win 2 national titles just a couple years ago and has, really this dominant Georgia team that we've seen for about the past decade here. But I think we've seen it in the SEC championship game. They can bear down when they need to, and I think they'll be able to do just enough in this one to win this thing. But if you told me Notre Dame won by 3, I wouldn't be surprised at all either. So going over this one again, in the next round, I have Oregon advancing to face Texas, who I also have advancing. And then on the other side of the bracket, I have Penn State advancing to face Georgia. And that's what we had to start the playoff as well. And as of right now, I'm sticking with my pick right now. I think Texas will beat Oregon if this is the matchup. And I think Georgia will beat Penn State to meet for a 3rd time in the national championship game. And right now, I am still going to roll with Georgia to beat Texas for a 3rd time to win the national championship. So anyway, I know that was a little bit of a longer one going over all the games here, but exciting 2 days of college football here. Looking forward to the matchups overall. I think it's fair to say that these games will be a little bit more exciting than the first round games for the college football playoff. I think there was some exciting moments in those games, but I think all these games will be a little bit closer. I think the first 2 in the Tuesday night one, Penn State, Boise State, and the Texas-Arizona State game, I think those ones are obviously the biggest spread. So, wow, that's not groundbreaking news that I think those will be the, least I think they will be competitive. That's not what I'm saying, but I think those will be the largest margins of victory. I think both of those are about 2 scores, but the last 2 games, the Rose Bowl, and then the last one here, the Sugar Bowl, I think those 2 games are going to make up for any downfalls from last week or, the other 2 games. I think those 2 games are going to be absolutely incredible. So cannot wait for these games. And, we'll be back to talk about it afterwards and be here before we get to the semifinals and the national championship as well. So anyway, that'll do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.